Welcome to the Frontline Voices. Before we begin this haunting tale from the frontier, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from today, and if you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button. In 1876, coffin maker Samuel Carpenter discovered that every coffin he built carried its owner's final wish. The dead were telling him their stories, sharing their regrets. When Samuel decided to pass these secrets on to the living, every family in town learned their hidden truths, but the biggest secret would come from Samuel's own coffin. Millfield was the kind of town where death came regular as seasons. Mining accidents, fever, old age, and sometimes the violent kind that folks didn't talk about in daylight. Samuel Carpenter had been building coffins there for 15 years, and his hands knew the measure of every soul who'd passed through his workshop. He worked alone in a building that smelled of pine shavings and linseed oil. His tools were simple: saw, plane, chisel, and a steady patience that came from understanding that his work mattered more than most. Every coffin was built to last eternity, or at least long enough for the earth to reclaim what belonged to it. Samuel never rushed, never cut corners. Each box was sanded smooth, joints fitted tight, lined with whatever fabric the family could afford. He took pride in sending folks off proper, even if they couldn't afford much proper in life. That's why he was surprised when the first voice came. It was a Tuesday evening in October. Samuel was finishing a coffin for Mrs. Henderson, the baker's wife who'd died of consumption. Simple pine box, nothing fancy, lined with blue cotton her daughter had saved from a dress. He was applying the final coat of stain when he heard it. "Tell my daughter I forgave her." Samuel froze, brush halfway to the wood. The workshop was empty except for him and the coffin. He looked around, saw nothing but shadows dancing in the lamplight. "Hello?" he called softly. Silence. Samuel shook his head and returned to his work. Long days, that's all. Too many hours breathing in wood dust and solvent. But the voice came again, clearer this time. "She thinks I died angry about the money. Tell her I forgave her before I went." Samuel set down his brush carefully. The voice was coming from the coffin. Mrs. Henderson's voice, gentle but insistent, like she was lying inside the box talking to him. Samuel had built hundreds of coffins. Never heard so much as a creak that couldn't be explained by settling wood. This was different. This was impossible. "Mrs. Henderson?" he whispered, feeling foolish. "Samuel Carpenter," the voice replied. "I knew you'd hear me. You always listened to folks when they were breathing. Figured you might listen now." Samuel's hands trembled as he leaned closer to the coffin. You're dead, ma'am." "Well aware of that, son. But I've got something needs saying before you nail me shut." Samuel pulled up his work stool and sat beside the coffin like he was visiting a sick friend. "What do you need to tell me?" "My daughter Martha took $20 from my jar to pay for her boy's medicine. She thinks I died disappointed in her, but I left that money there hoping she'd take it. Tell her that. Tell her I'm proud she put her child before her pride." The voice faded then, like candle flame guttered by wind. Samuel sat in the quiet workshop for a long time, staring at the pine box that looked like every other coffin he'd ever built. The next morning, he walked to Martha Henderson's house, found her sitting on her porch, eyes red from crying, baby on her lap. "Mrs. Henderson," Samuel said carefully, "I have a message from your mother." Martha looked up, startled. "What kind of message?" Samuel told her exactly what he'd heard, about the money, about forgiveness, about pride. Martha's face crumpled, but not with sadness, with relief. "She knew?" Martha whispered. "She hoped you'd take it," Samuel confirmed. Martha held her baby closer and cried then, but they were different tears, cleaner somehow. Word spread quickly in a town like Millfield. Samuel Carpenter could talk to the dead. Some folks thought he was touched by God. Others figured he'd breathed too much varnish. But when the next death came, old Pete Morrison who'd fallen drunk into the creek, Samuel heard Pete's voice too. Tell my brother the money's buried under the oak tree behind the barn. All of it. I never spent a dime of what I stole from him." Samuel found Pete's brother Tom and delivered the message. Tom dug up a mason jar containing $300 and a note apologizing for 30 years of lies. After that, Samuel stopped doubting what he heard. The voices came with every coffin now. Sometimes angry, sometimes sad, mostly regretful. A woman who wanted her husband to know she'd never stopped loving him, even after the affair. A man who needed his son to understand that the harsh words came from fear, not disappointment. A child who wanted her parents to know she wasn't afraid when the fever took her. Samuel became the bridge between the living and the dead. He delivered messages that healed old wounds, revealed hidden truths, and sometimes exposed secrets that had been buried for decades. Like when he built a coffin for Sheriff Daniels and heard a confession that changed everything. "Samuel," the sheriff's voice whispered from inside the pine box, "I need you to know about the Campbell fire." Samuel had been a boy when the Campbell family died in a house fire that took 3 children and their mother. The father had been away on business, came home to ashes and grief. "That fire wasn't an accident," Sheriff Daniels continued. "It was set by Mayor Hutchins. The Campbells were going to expose him for stealing from the town treasury." Samuel's blood went cold. Mayor Hutchins was still alive, still in office, still trusted by everyone in Millfield. "There's evidence in my desk." The sheriff's voice grew fainter. "Bottom drawer, behind the false back. Documents, receipts, a letter Campbell wrote before he died. I was too much of a coward to act on it while I breathed. Don't let me be a coward in death, too." Samuel faced his biggest choice yet. Some secrets destroyed more than they healed. But justice delayed wasn't justice denied. It was justice abandoned. He went to the sheriff's office that night, found the hidden evidence exactly where the voice had said. Documents proving that Mayor Hutchins had embezzled thousands of dollars and killed a family to hide his crimes. Samuel took the evidence to the territorial marshal. Within a week, Hutchins was arrested. The town was shaken, but the truth had its own weight. Some burdens were too heavy for graves to hold. But with each message Samuel delivered, he noticed something changing in himself. The voices were getting louder, more frequent. Sometimes he heard them even when he wasn't near a coffin, and they weren't just from the recently dead anymore. Voices from graves years old, decades old, all wanting their stories told. Samuel was losing weight, losing sleep. The line between the living and the dead was blurring for him. He'd always been alone, but now he was alone among the living while surrounded by the voices of the departed. That's when he started building his own coffin. He worked on it in the evenings after the regular orders were finished. Plain pine, like all the others, but built with special care. Every joint perfect, every surface smooth as glass. As he worked, he wondered what voice would speak from this box, what message he would leave behind. Samuel had no family, few friends. His life had been dedicated to serving others in their final need. What secrets did he carry? What regrets would echo from his own wooden tomb? As he applied the final stain to his coffin, Samuel felt a strange peace settling over him. He'd spent so long listening to the dead that he'd forgotten how to live among the living. But maybe that was his purpose. Maybe some people were meant to be bridges between worlds. That night, as Samuel lay in his narrow bed above the workshop, he heard something that made his heart stop. His own voice, coming from the coffin downstairs. "Samuel," the voice said, "come listen to what you need to know." Samuel rose slowly, pulled on his boots, and walked down to his workshop. The coffin sat in the moonlight streaming through the window, ordinary as sunrise but weighted with impossible meaning. "I'm listening," Samuel said to his own voice. "You've been carrying other people's stories so long, you forgot your own," the voice replied. "You think you're alone. But every message you delivered, every secret you revealed, every truth you brought to light, those were gifts, not from the dead to the living, but from a living man who chose to serve something larger than himself." Samuel felt tears on his cheeks. "What's my message to leave behind?" that listening matters, that the dead don't want to be forgotten, and the living don't want to die with their words unsaid. You built bridges with pine and regret, but the real bridge was your willingness to hear what others couldn't. "Am I dying?" Samuel asked. "Everyone's dying," his voice replied. "You're just closer to understanding what that means. But you're not gone yet. There's still time to live among the breathing while you listen to the breathless." The voice faded then, leaving Samuel alone with his own heartbeat echoing in the quiet workshop. Samuel lived for another 20 years after that night. He kept building coffins, kept hearing voices, kept delivering messages. But he also started accepting dinner invitations, joining conversations at the general store, even courting a widow named Elizabeth who didn't mind that her suitor talked to the dead for a living. When Samuel finally died at 72, his own coffin was ready. Elizabeth found a note tucked inside the lid. To whoever hears this voice, Samuel Carpenter spent his life listening to last words. His own last words are these: "Every story matters. Every voice deserves to be heard, and death is not the end of speaking, only the beginning of a different kind of conversation." The new coffin maker, a young man named David who'd learned the trade from Samuel, swore he heard those words clearly the first time he opened Samuel's workshop after the funeral. And sometimes, late at night when he was working on a particularly difficult coffin, David heard Samuel's voice offering advice, encouragement, and the occasional reminder that the dead were never really gone as long as someone was still willing to listen. Did this story make you think about the messages you'd want to leave behind? Do you believe the dead have unfinished business with the living? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you believe stories about bridging two worlds need to be heard, don't forget to follow the Frontline Voices.